Hi there, welcome to Change Geek, where I share content that will impact and change your life for greater personal growth. I'm your host, Constance On, and today we are covering toxic bosses and how to survive them. When I talk about toxic bosses in the workplace, let me first explain what a toxic boss is before we jump to conclusions, right? It's someone who mistreats their employees by continuously crossing personal boundaries or professional boundaries with little or no consciousness of what their wrongdoing is. They don't consider the impact of the overall company, the organization, any of the subordinates. Some examples that they might do for testing those boundaries are violating ethics, having gross bias, being very demeaning, verbally abusive, yelling. We'll get into some of those examples in more detail here. So first I want to explain what is a toxic boss. So a lot of toxic bosses statistically have a high percentage of being sociopathic. But the misnomer is that a lot of people think that sociopaths and psychopaths are very similar. In fact, maybe you've heard these terms used transparently with each other. But I want to explain that the main difference, there is a difference. They do not equal to each other. The main difference between sociopaths and psychopaths in the workplace is that sociopaths have a remnant consciousness. It means that sociopaths have an awareness of what they're doing wrong, and they choose whether or not they respond to recovering if they've done wrong, right? And they're really good, sociopaths are good at pretending to care through emotions or displaying actions that care because they know that's the social norm. You're supposed to apologize when you do certain things, right? Now, a psychopath actually has zero consciousness about what they're doing wrong. They actually, the example that you hear, like someone is hurting, a psychopath is hurting someone and their heart rate doesn't skip a beat. That is actually a very good example of a psychopath. It does not affect their consciousness. It doesn't affect anything on them biologically. Their heart rate is quite normal. But I want to explain that officially, from the Mental Health Official Handbook is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that they actually do not diagnose. There's not a clinical official diagnosis of what a sociopath or a psychopath is. Instead, the diagnosis is called antisocial personality disorder. So when you're clinically talking about it, it's only considered antisocial personality disorder, which groups together both sociopaths and psychopaths, right? So you may look, what does a toxic boss look like, right? So let's get first into what you believe in your mind a toxic boss looks like. And you believe that you can smell them a mile away, you can hear them. They're obnoxious. It's really obvious. But I want to tell you, in the modern business world, we don't see that. The toxic bosses are actually very, very hard to decipher, distinguish. They're very savvy in our modern business world to be more coveted about how they are and their behaviors. In the modern business world, they are by far more difficult to spot. And as we use social media and emails and instant messaging in the workplace, these toxic bosses, they know that that's there. So they're much more coveted in how they cover their tracks and what they say in writing or not, right? They know how to leverage media. They know how to leverage things in the company to their advantage. After all, I never said toxic bosses were stupid. They're actually very, very intelligent and savvy. So it takes a little bit longer to find out whether that boss, when they're doing certain actions in the longevity, whether they're toxic or not. So what does a toxic boss look like? They look just like you. They're very charismatic. They're very attractive, very charming. They have flirtatious undertones. Now, I'm not saying this is the case for all toxic bosses, but it's a very high statistical rate that you see that many of them do have these characteristics. And, the only way to really truly find out if they're a toxic boss is when you see these certain symptoms that I'm fixing to go over with you, and you see it happen consistently for a while. And there's a Chinese proverb, and it says, time reveals a person's true nature, and how true that you will be able to see that as time passes. So how does a toxic boss act, right? Well, number one, they avoid conflict. They avoid conflict with you and dealing with issues that will reveal their flaws. They self-promote themselves at others' expenses. And they often have what I call psychological displacement. And let me explain. Psychological displacement is narcissism or sociopathic disorders like bipolar personality disorder. Remember, all psychopaths are very high in their rate in how they measure with narcissism. So you see a direct correlation with this. They also manipulate as part of their normal default mode, right? They also focus only on the short term, or mostly on the short term. They often demean their employees while they do that, and they cater very well to their bosses above them. So in the organization, they may behave one way to their boss, one way to their peers, and one way to subordinates below them. So how do you survive toxic bosses? Here's my top do's. Do strategize an exit plan. Stay professional all the time. Continue to do your best performance. Don't let them get to you. Don't let them wear your performance down. Always avoid conflict with them that's unnecessary. You need to meet in group settings when possible and maintain your core value system. Don't let them sway that. And stay emotionless when you do get attacked by them, okay? And these are my top don'ts, and I'm going to call them the gripped, G-R-I-P-D. And gripped means don't gossip about them, don't retaliate, don't internalize, don't take it personal, and don't devalue yourself. The most important thing when you're experiencing a toxic boss in your life is that you don't let it erode yourself, and you keep the valuation of yourself true to the core, okay? So that simple gripped would help. So there's some free tools on my website at constanceon.com. You can find out some things like the differences between toxic bosses by gender. You can find some other differences that I laid out in a Venn diagram, and those are listed under free tools on my website. Feel free also to go to my Facebook page, Change Management Geek. And if you have any comments that you would like to share on this topic, please write them in the bottom. I hope you like the content. Click that like button and please subscribe so I can develop more content. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.